Hey guys, it's your boy Eli from the Geeks and Turds, and I'm here for another comic book recommendations. And today is October 2nd. This is the beginning of Halloween. Well, technically it's not just, but you know what I mean. So I thought it'd be a cool idea to do some kind of horror theme or scary kind of comic books to check out. Now I'm not usually that kind of into horror, more into the horror films, but I do have some recommendations to do. I have some for the next few weeks. And they start kind of small today, something that you most likely would never hear often with this kind of book. But just to get, but this is an interesting book to recommend. It's it's still new. It's by this point, it's on its second or third issue, and I have the first two. And it's a pretty okay series. But if you're a fan of this, then I highly recommend it. And that is Iron Maiden, Legacy of the Beast. That's right. So those of you who don't know, I'm a huge Iron Maiden fan. They were here in Houston. I couldn't make it. Had a job. So, but everyone else I know went there and had a lot of fun. So that's a good thing. So Iron Maiden is like one of the big bands from the UK. They were part of the new wave of British heavy metal. And I know this is a comic books recommended books talk, but you know, why are you talking about heavy metal? Well, that's the point of this book. So essentially, it is inspired by the video game that was also inspired by the band called Legacy of the Beast, where you play around as their mascot, Eddie, and go around beating demons, sorcerers, wizards, the devil, evil Nazis. So you can kind of see why I chose to do this. It's very heavy, old school heavy metal with it, but it also has like these fun kind of interactions. And yeah, so this is kind of like a giving more story to the actual comic, to the actual game. I'm sorry, because the game is usually it's kind of fast paced. You know, it's a very turn-based RPG kind of stuff, and this gives a lot more story content. So the game itself is kind of story, but it's a very fun game. It's very difficult at some points too. I often have a hard time getting through it. But no, let's start talk about the story. So the story essentially it's continuing the whole theme of the game, where you go as Eddie and start saving the world. And this book essentially it goes off that and you go into like all the stuff that eventually happens in the game. You have characters that were in the game, and our main character is Eddie, who is basically 95% a silent protagonist. If you guys don't know what that means, you tend to see that in mostly in video games where the silent protagonist doesn't say a thing. You're supposed to immerse yourself as the character. So this is an interesting take on that. So our character is a silent protagonist. He usually responds with grunts like kind of stuff. So you won't see as much of interesting interesting story dynamic there. But what you will see is like these cool like mystic effects and kind of like body horror kind of stuff. And even at some point in the book, it goes over stuff that happens in the game. So it talks about Eddie fighting the Wicker Man, this evil Nazi, and one of my favorite things that happens. And I'm putting the page on the camera, and I'm going to describe it to you audio listeners so if you've never checked this out. Eddie rips the head off of the devil, which is a clear reference to the album Number of the Beast, where Eddie's literally holding not the exact cover, but like the EMP, where Eddie's holding the head of the devil and showing it to the whoever's looking at the album. But no, it's clearly inspired by that, and there's a lot of nods to like Iron Maiden's music and their albums. So it's if you're a huge Iron Maiden fan, I recommend check this out because it's so much fun. Art wise, it's kind of like a third party or like a lesser known group than say Marvel or DC. And the art can be 50-50. And I'm trying to look for the exact page where it kind of proves that. And well, here we go. Usually it's not that much color. It's very for you audio guys, it's basically a scene where this guy's walking around. There's not that much good color. It's kind of dark, which you kind of expect from a book like this. But it's I don't know, there's too much red, in my opinion, for these things. It's supposed to, and it makes sense. It's a lot of fire, a lot of destruction, but at the same time, it's kind of distracting. It's kind of muted, you know. Everyone's wearing kind of like the same kind of stuff. There's no there's a lot of absence of bright colors, but you know there are times it makes sense, and a lot of the lighting is weird. And there are times where this is not meant for kids. And if you guys know anything about Iron Maiden, they're not the heaviest guys, but they're pretty. They can be pretty metal. There's a reason why they were the big band in like the 70s, 80s, with titles like Number of the Beast. I can't really remember most of them. Oh shit, I'm really showing some bad. Let me look up some real quick because I'm spacing out. It's Aces High, which is part of the Power Slave album. That's one of my favorite songs. But you know, besides the point, there's a lot of references to the music, a lot of references to albums, especially the art. But no, if you want to see like just your buddy Eddie doing some badass stuff, and maybe listen to some music in the background, some Iron Maiden music in the background, and this is your jam. It's really fun thing to watch, and if you're a fan of these guys, it doesn't disappoint. But do I feel like it could be better? Oh yeah, hell yeah. Hell fucking yeah, it could be better. There's, like I said, there's not much towards the story. And for those of you who are wondering like who published this, essentially it was published by Heavy Metal Magazine, which is still around, surprisingly. And they used to do like a lot of crazy stories back in the day, back when not when heavy metal was so good, you know. It was a different time period. So now that we got that out of the way, it was a fun read. I still recommend it. It's still pretty early. It's a 5-issue miniseries, and we only just recently got, I want to say recently got the third by this recording, but I still would recommend it. If I see it at any comic book shop that I go to, I'm like, oh, I gotta pick it up. You know, it's Iron Maiden. I'm a huge fan, and I gotta pick it up. I gotta pick it up. I gotta support my group and that kind of stuff. Brand loyalty, you know. But it's a lot of it's fun for anyone who's interested into that kind of genre. And now we get to the big two, Marvel and DC. So last week I talked a lot about Marvel, so I thought I'm starting off this one with DC. And this is another continuous going series at this moment. We're recently the day of this recording, the 5th issue just released, so I'm about to go bounce to go get that soon. But essentially, the book that I want to talk about. So a while back, Marvel did essentially something very interesting. It was called Marvel Zombies. So essentially, there was this zombie virus that affected everyone, especially the superheroes, and now they go around eating people. And it's one of the most interesting stories ever. It doesn't go down being like a zombie book, like kind of like Walking Dead or something like that. Like we start seeing the how humanity would act around this idea. Instead, the zombies have personality in that book. But to DC didn't do something like that. Well, they had something like that. It was called Blackest Night. And it was an interesting take on zombies where if you know the Green Lanterns, you know, those who are worthy of it, who have a strong will be able to harness the power of the rings, and how each color spectrum has a different thing. So Jeff Johns introduced the black rings, which means death. So if you're a character who's deceased, chances are you're going to get the black ring and start off like this cool zombie thing that Jeff Johns is kind of well known for doing in this time period. But no, I want to talk about another book. This book just recently came out, and I think it's one of the most interesting zombie takes that the superhero genre has done. And this is a variant cover. And for those of you who are listening, I'm going to describe the cover real quick. But the book is called Deceased. So essentially, it's the cover. So a quick note, because I'm again describing the cover. Essentially, it's Batman, but like with like his jaw opened up, with like decay around his face, bloodshot red eyes, kind of stuff, and it's so cool. And when I got this when I was at my local convention, Comic Palooza here in Houston, and I immediately wanted to get the other variant cover, which was like it was like this nod to the movie It, where Joker was giving like Robin I'm sorry, comic fail, where Joker was giving Robin this the red balloon, like A young Robin was just like standing there. Pennywise, I'm Joker, was giving him the little red balloon. And it was like so freaky. It was like, oh my god, this is perfect. The two murderous clowns. We'll get to them one day. And I was like, oh, I gotta get that. But I have to go do something real quick. And now that variant is gone. And I was very upset. But I still ended up getting the book, so it's a lot of fun. So essentially, in this story, in DCeased, Darkseid, who is the equivalent of Thanos, but a lot more badass and a lot more scary in the DC universe, comes in, kidnaps Cyborg, and believes that with Cyborg's help, he can find the anti-Life equation. The anti-Life equation being basically this sort of mathematical, I know it's nerdy shit, mathematical idea that you can prove that life is meaningless. Yeah, and he's using Cyborg for some sort of weird experiment, and everything goes wrong in so many ways possible. And you expect to be like, Cyborg just loses all his humanity and just becomes a subservient slave or something, like most stories about the life equation tend to be, anti-life equation tend to be. But this does something different. Like I said, zombies. Instead, it does like this sort of weird viral infection, where if you were just to say look at your phone and see some sort of weird message, you automatically become this sort of weird craving monster that desires flesh, and it's crazy. It starts off with Darkseid, and you're like, whoa, Darkseid's supposed to be like this all near omnipotent being that like could take like 3 Supermen to beat. Yeah, 3 Supermen, something like that. And he turns and starts like screwing things up. And then this is eventually passed on to Earth. And now all the heroes and all the citizens of Earth are trying to run away from this zombie apocalypse that spread like wildfire, more than you would see in like any film or iteration. And I gotta say, the art is expressive as hell, and like and everything goes wrong in so many ways that you're sometimes surprised. And in this story, Superman's trying to find a way to see what's happening. Cyborg is just getting away, and just everything goes hell. And one of the things that you don't seem to see it in like most zombie films is like it gets a lot more bloodier. So there's this. I'm about to show you guys on the video, and I'm about to describe it through the audio again, where Cyborg is in the middle of town, and he has unknowingly passed on the virus. And the first thing all these people start doing is ripping each other to shreds, and that is crazy. So like right here, you can see some dude. He's like gnawing at his face, tearing the flesh off of it. And it's so crazy, and Cyborg is just like, what is going on? And the first person to respond is always Superman. He starts seeing all this stuff, and like once he realizes stuff is going down, he's like, oh, I gotta get home to my wife and child. And who else is there is Damian Wayne, who I've said before is the son of Bruce Wayne. And Bruce is one of the first people to figure this out, and all these people are coming at him. And there's this very intimate scene of Damian. You tend not to see it a lot, because they oftentimes depict Damian to be like this cold kid because he was raised by the League of Assassins, League of Shadows, basically a group of assassins. So kill is kill. I'll do it because I have to. And now that he's been raised by Batman, he starts feeling emotions, and you see that emotion. He's like, there's a scene where, and I'm about to show it to everybody, and I'll describe it you guys know the drill, where Damian is essentially looking at his phone, and he wants to check up on his dad. He's worried, and you don't really see that often. And that's one of the cool things that you tend to see in a lot of zombie media is that I gotta talk about my family. My family's important and stuff like that. And you get that with someone who usually doesn't like care or like doesn't seem to care, which is Damian. But yes, it sets the tone that this is gonna be really creepy, really messed up, and really crazy. And sadly, you know, superheroes are not. Um, they'll get infected. So yeah. While in say something like Marvel Zombies, where it was messed up, it kind of fun in a weird way. I don't know how to describe that. Like in the Marvel Zombies, at some point Galactus comes to destroy the Earth, and you're like, oh yeah, Galactus is gonna end this zombie apocalypse. Nope, they get taken over. He gets taken over by all the Marvel zombies. It's so crazy, and then they get cosmic powers and stuff. It's Marvel Zombies is more way out there, more fun. This is more serious, and this is it has emotional impact. And and sadly at this point in the story, stuff happens. You know, people get ripped up. Um, Characters like Nightwing, who is like second tier to Batman, is getting all you know beaten up. He gets bitten and he turns into a zombie. And Batman's at his house, at his manor, with Alfred, and this is one of my favorite scenes where Batman has to fight his former proteges because not only is Damian Wayne there, but Nightwing there, but also the third Robin who goes by Red Robin. I'm trying to remember his it's Damian is the fourth. Tim Drake. There we go. I know. He starts fighting and he's trying to protect Alfred. And it's a very it's one of those scenes where whenever especially in like zombie film, in zombie medium, where you see your favorite character start getting eaten, it ends. That's how the first issue ends. It ends with Batman getting. And I know it's a huge spoiler, but I'm not gonna go more into as where it goes on. I'm just talking about the first issue here. That it essentially he gets caught and he gets bitten, and that's an emotional moment for her. That was one of the big moments. I won't say emotional. I'm just saying because that's the first thing that comes to mind. But it was like one of the most what the f happened is, and it made me continue reading. And there's a lot of great scenes as in this series. Like they treat it with respect as to a zombie apocalypse. And it's not lighthearted like Marvel Zombies kind of tends to be, but essentially it's a lot. It's what you would want from a zombie book involving your favorite superheroes. And yeah, I highly recommend it. It's really good. Like I said earlier, we as of today's recording, the fifth issue came out, and this is a 6 issue miniseries. So we got one more issue to go, and it's rightfully that It's going to end around October. You know, Halloween season. Some say it would have been better if you released it on October, but we wouldn't have gotten this awesome conclusion by the end of October. But it's so much fun. It's like why do I keep saying so much fun? It's it's an interesting read. I recommend it. It's something I would like to see more people read about, and a lot more interest and an interesting take on the DC universe. You never tend to see like this stuff. Is it canon? I don't know. Is this an alternate universe? Maybe. All I know is that I'm reading a fun story, messed up horror zombie book coming from DC, and it might be better than Marvel Zombies. I don't know. That's a different taste, but yeah. So going back to the Marvel train real quick, one of the book. Well, this isn't technically a horror book. It's a very much a psychological book, and this is going more for the people who are more into psychological stuff, especially when it comes to horror. Well, this is more of an interesting psychological stuff, and I think it's a fun read. That's to recommend it. And that is Daredevil, the man. And it's a Daredevil book, but this one just goes by The Man Without Fear. This is a 6 issue miniseries, where, and the reason I choose this, I'm going back to say, retracting the stuff that I said earlier. There is some kind of weird, scary elements, and it's kind of like scary for the mind, where you know, Matt Murdock, he's been through an accident. He's almost crippled. Yeah, no, blind and crippled. Only to Matt. And essentially it's sort of a battle of the minds where he has to convince himself to keep going even though all this doubt is on him. Where he doesn't want to keep going, but he has to keep going. And a lot of the art makes it seem more horror because there's a scene, and I'm about to show it to you guys, where he's trying to save all his loved ones, and there's this sort of weird creature like thing with his outfit, and it looks so almost horrifying. It's sort of, so that's what I'm saying. Like, it's kind of like, it's psychological, but you can kind of argue that it's psychological horror because it's it's his mind that he's fighting, and all these sort of evil, negative thoughts that go on in his head. And especially in this first issue, he's being like ripped down to shreds to like what he is, and it's sort of this weird horror vibe to it, and it's essentially it reestablishes Matt as the man without fear who has to go to you without fear, and it's so good. It's one of my favorite books that I've read. It's one of my favorite miniseries, and it's so interesting how they took this idea of Matt, you know, struggling with his guilt, his regrets, and all that stuff, and try to make it more like, again, in this weird psychological way where you would just see him like, you know, beaten down and barred, and you know, struggling to like get back up, and now it's self-doubt, and then his self-doubt is personified as this sort of evil representation of Daredevil, and it's sort of horrific to see. You know, you can kind of argue that that's supposed to mean how this life has essentially consumed him, how he has no room for happiness anymore, which is kind of like weird and true to Daredevil, because at some point, you know, he does loses a lot of loved ones, especially romantic interests, which is kind of sad. I Daredevil has a lot of romantic interests, and they have almost, except maybe one or two, did not survive, and that's a lot of the guilt and weight that he has to go with. So, yeah, and the thing that really interests me about this book is that we delve that deep into his psyche and see sort of like the things that he's afraid of, the things that haunt him, and yeah, it's this, like I said, it's this weird, you can almost argue that it's a psychological horror because of the way he has to fight sort of himself, the way the artist chooses to display the horror. And I just realized I didn't credit the artists and writers for the last two books, so I'm probably going to do that right now. But the writer for The Man Without, starting off The Man Without Fear, I'm sorry. But the writer for The Man Without Fear. And by the way, this issue that I have of Man Without Fear was one of the first issues to come out that talks about Stanley's passing. May he rest in peace. So it's always interesting to go with that, to mention that. But it's written by Jed MacKay, and it's drawn by Danilo S. Beyruth. I hope I said that right. And credit to you guys for credit to those guys who did all this work, because Danilo S. Beyruth really captures sort of this weird horror take of Daredevil, making it seem like they can understand that his psyche is really dark and messed up, which just kind of makes sense. DC's, it was written by. Oh, I hate when it fell all the way in the back. Yeah, it's all the way in the back, like the last one. But oh, I'm wrong. I can't really find it. Okay, Tom Taylor with art by Trevor Hairsing and Steffer Guidano, which means that there's premium alter. And whoa, there's 3 artists for this for DC's. Oh wow. Trevor Harstein, Stefano Guido, and James Herron. I'm pretty sure I mispronounced one of those. And yeah, which makes sense because there's a lot of detail in these books. So yeah, Legacy of the Beast was written by, and it was also drawn by. Give me 1 second. Yeah, written by. I don't know how to pronounce this. I'm gonna try my best. I hope I don't butcher it. But apparently, it's written by Lexi Leon. That's Lexi with 2 L's. I don't know how that works. I apologize. The script was written by Ian Edgerton. Pencils by Kevin West. And yeah, that's Those are the three. Those are the first three books. Now, the next book I'm going to talk about, it's well, like, it's not the first issue that I got. It's one that was recently released, but I'm talking about the whole series in this one. It's and that is this year's current run of Venom by Donny Cates and drawn by Ryan. Most of the time it's really Ryan Stegman, but this one's called by Ivan Canello. But essentially it's sort of this interesting take on the whole Venom symbiote thing. And this happened after Spider-Man 800, where Flash Thompson was, recently deceased. He lost the Venom symbiote to Eddie Brock in the earlier issues of that. And it starts off with Eddie sort of like saying, man, Eddie, and that, Flash was the best of us. He should have kept the symbiote. I don't deserve it, and all this crazy stuff. And the symbiote's like, no, 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 you shouldn't feel that way. It's sort of this weird dynamic, sort of relationship between the symbiote and Eddie. But the reason I chose this for October in the sense of horror is that a lot of the art is very like dark and creepy. While I don't have the first issue on me, I do have an example to go by in terms of Ryan Stegman, and I'll talk about this book later at some point when it's actually done. That this book is Ryan Stegman and Donny Cates art really works as kind of horror, and it's sort of the coloring and the use of expressions. And I'm talking about in his Absolute Carnage book, where if you especially see like the first few pages, you kind of see like the sort of horror element in Ryan Stegman's great art, and you kind of see that more as it goes along. I'm trying to make sure this isn't an Absolute Carnage talk, because that's gonna come soon. Trust me, because I'm loving Absolute Carnage. But no, Venom essentially, and which leads into Absolute Carnage, by the way. Also, first off, this is the issue 18, and I can't remember the name of the cover art of the artist who did the cover for this, but they're kind of doing this sort of weird Immortal Hulk reference, where Banner's face would disgustingly turn into the Hulk, and I thought it was pretty cool that they did this for Venom, where it's Eddie's face turning into Venom. But essentially, the book it goes into more of like the history of the Venom symbiote, of the symbiotes. Sorry, not Venom symbiotes, just the symbiotes. And they give this sort of dark horror vibe, and they talk about like these sort of elder beings who killed one another, and this sort of dark being that uses this dark sword, and it goes into the origins of why symbiotes are scared of. Their weaknesses are always like high pitched sounds and fire, and it goes into that, and it's just sort of this dark and creepy, and especially the way it's lit and the use of shadows is really captures that sort of darkness and sort of weirdness. And Venom sort of starts changing into this more grotesque looking thing, and it kind of and this weird way of capturing the relationship between Venom and Eddie, and not making it seem like it's a good thing, unlike some of the movies and earlier representations. Rather makes it look like, yeah, this isn't a good relationship for Eddie to be in. And if you go further into the books, we go into Eddie's history with the symbiotes, the surprise history of the symbiotes who have been here actually longer before Spider-Man came with the black suit after Secret Wars. And it's kind of cool. And referencing between different comics is also pretty awesome. But the one thing I really like about it is that and surprisingly it kind of weirds me out and kind of annoys me at the same time, is that for whatever reason, and especially with Ryan Stegman, is that in his art, it's always raining. Like Watchmen kind of raining, Sin City really more like raining, where everywhere he goes it's raining, and it's always dark, and there's barely any sunshine. But it works. It works for the story that Donny Cates is writing. And you heard me say it before. I really love Donny Cates' writing, and especially when it comes to how he's doing these books. It's so much more interesting than past iterations. Not saying that the past iterations have been bad, but rather it just does stuff that no one has really tried with Venom. And you kind of want to do that, and he does. And you don't really see like that Lethal Protector stuff where he's always like chopping people's heads off, which makes a lot more sense to be talking about in sort of these recommendations. But I chose to talk about the other stuff because it's a lot more interesting. And yeah, so I think that comes nearly to the end of my recommendations. But essentially, yeah, Venom has been an ongoing series currently. It's been continuously praised, especially by Donny Cates' writing, by the fans, and this sort of new take of Venom. And he's currently writing this event story at the time of this recording called Absolute Carnage, which I love it. And I can't wait to talk about it with you guys. It's still going, and I kind of want to give it to you guys when it's at least almost over or actually over. I don't know yet. But yeah, Absolute Carnage is great. Rourke Donny Cates' writing is great. And he really captures this interesting horror vibe when it comes to Venom and sort of this psychological relationship that he has with Eddie with the symbiote. And yeah, it's a lot of good stuff. I've been singing the praises of this book for a while now. But no, that's all the books I have for today. I have more books. Honestly, I have a lot more books that I want to talk about, but I'm gonna be subbing those up for the next recommendations. So yeah, that's about it, guys. Thanks for checking this out. This has been Eli the Geek Centurions, where you can catch us on Castbox, Spotify, Google Podcast, and Apple Podcast, along with a lot of other stuff. So, guys, it's been fun. I hope you catch you guys in another of my recommendations. And you know, it's over, so go out there and have some fun. Be mindful of the kids, please. And yeah, it's been Eli from the Geek Centurions. And this has been the Comics Recommendations of October 2nd. And we are signing out.